There is a quality that separates certain residential gardens from everything around them that is difficult to name precisely but instantly recognizable. It is not the size of the garden. Many of the most visually compelling residential gardens in America occupy modest lots. It is not the amount of money spent on hardscaping or irrigation systems or professional installation. Some of the most impressive gardens in the most expensive neighborhoods were planted by the homeowners themselves over the course of several seasons. The quality that separates these gardens from the ones beside them, the quality that makes drivers slow down and pedestrians stop, is plant selection, specifically the selection of plants that possess what designers call presence, the ability to command visual attention, to create an impression of substance and permanence, to make a garden feel considered and intentional, rather than assembled from whatever was available at the garden center on a Saturday morning in May. The plants that create this impression are not secrets. They are available at garden centers across America, often sitting in the same section as everything else, priced comparably to the plants that create no impression at all. The difference is not availability, and it is not cost. The difference is knowledge, the specific knowledge of which plants possess the visual weight, the structural presence, and the seasonal drama that make a garden look like something significant happened here, and what exactly it takes to unlock that presence in the plants that have it. 13 of those plants are on this list. Every one of them is available right now, and stay until the very end, because the 13th plant on this list is the single most effective curb appeal plant available in American horticulture, and it is one that most residential gardeners have never considered using in the way that makes it extraordinary. Plant 1, boxwood. The structure. That says everything. Boxwood is the plant that professional landscape designers specify first in high-end residential projects. Before any flowering plant is chosen, before any color is considered, before any seasonal interest is planned. The reason is not that boxwood is more beautiful than flowering alternatives. It is that boxwood creates the structural foundation that makes everything else in the garden look more considered, more intentional, and more expensive. The clipped geometric forms that boxwood holds, balls, cones, cubes, tight hedges, create a visual vocabulary in the garden that signals deliberate design in a way that unclipped informal plantings never achieve. A pair of matching boxwood balls flanking a front door transforms the entry of a house in a way that flower beds, no matter how abundant, simply do not. Smart gardeners know that the relationship between boxwood and perceived garden value is not subtle. Real estate professionals consistently document higher first impression scores for properties with clipped boxwood in foundation plantings versus equivalent properties without it. The geometric precision that boxwood holds indefinitely, maintaining whatever shape the shears give it until the next session, creates the impression of a garden that is actively maintained at a level of care that most people associate with professional management. The same property with the same house and the same lawn looks measurably more valuable to most observers when boxwood is present in the foundation planting than when it is absent. Modern disease-resistant selections. New Gen Independence, the Sun King series, provide the traditional dense dark green foliage while offering significantly improved resistance to boxwood blight. From Zone 5 through Zone 9, boxwood provides the evergreen structural backbone that makes every other plant in the landscape look more intentional by association. Plant 2, Japanese maples, the sculptural centerpiece. Japanese maple, Acer palmatum, is the plant that stops people in front of residential gardens more reliably than any other single specimen plant available in American horticulture. The reason is the combination of qualities that Japanese maple possesses simultaneously and that no other commonly available garden tree replicates. The extraordinary leaf form with its deeply cut, palmate lobes that create a lacy, filtered texture unlike anything else in the temperate garden. The color range from chartreuse through every shade of green to deep burgundy and near black depending on variety. And the branching architecture that reveals itself in winter as one of the most beautiful structural forms in American residential gardening. A Japanese maple in the right location is a living sculpture that changes character with every season, and that becomes more impressive every year it is left in place. The design principle that makes Japanese maple So effective in the high-value residential garden is the principle of singular emphasis, the placement of one exceptional specimen in a location where it can be seen from multiple viewpoints and where its qualities can be appreciated without competition from equally complex plantings nearby. A Japanese maple placed at the corner of a front foundation planting, or in a lawn panel surrounded by ground cover, or as a focal point at the end of a garden path. These placements allow the tree to function as the design anchor that every significant garden needs, the element that the eye finds first and returns to repeatedly. The garden designed around a Japanese maple focal point has a visual logic that most gardens assembled from collections of equal emphasis plants cannot achieve. For full sun in zones 6 through 8, Bloodgood, Emperor Ori, and Crimson Queen weeping forms perform reliably. For shadier locations, Sango Kaku, with its coral red winter bark, and Osakazuki, for spectacular fall color, perform without the leaf scorch that sun-stressed red varieties exhibit. From Zone 5 through Zone 8, the correct variety rewards the gardener with decades of increasing beauty. Plant 3, ornamental grasses, the movement premium. Quality that separates gardens with ornamental grasses from gardens without them is movement. The continuous, responsive, fluid animation that grasses create in any breeze, and that makes a garden feel alive in a way that static plantings of shrubs and perennials cannot replicate. This movement is not merely pleasant. It is the quality that landscape architects and garden designers identify as one of the most powerful tools available for creating a sense of vitality and dynamism in the designed landscape. And it is a quality that costs a few dollars of plant material and produces returns that compound every season as the grass matures and the seed head production increases. Miscanthus sinensis, the most widely available and most versatile of the large ornamental grasses, reaches 6 to 8 feet in mature specimens, producing the architectural scale that the high-value residential garden requires for visual weight and presence. The cultivar Morning Light produces the most refined appearance of the commonly available selections, the narrow white-margined blades catching every shift of light through the day. The overall effect silver and luminous in a way that more straightforwardly green grasses never achieve. Gracilis is the original fine-leaved miscanthus selection that has been specified in high-end residential projects for decades for its elegant narrow blades and its copper-bronze fall color. Zebrinus and Strictus offer the distinctive horizontal gold banding across the blades that creates a visual texture unlike any other plant available at equivalent cost. A single large miscanthus backlit by afternoon sun so that seed heads become luminous is a garden feature worth 3 times its purchase price in visual contribution. A mass planting of 3 or 5 grasses at the property boundary creates a screen of movement and texture that simultaneously addresses privacy and provides one of the most beautiful fall and winter features in American residential. Gardening Plant 4, Hydrangea paniculata, the reliable, spectacular panicum. Hydrangea is the high-value garden plant that delivers the most visual return per dollar of purchase price of any flowering shrub. Available in American horticulture and the gardeners who understand this. Plant's capabilities use it as the backbone of the summer and fall garden in a way that creates exactly the impression of a designed, considered, invested landscape that distinguishes memorable residential gardens from forgettable ones. The flower heads that emerge white or cream in midsummer and deepen through pink to antique rose and bronze as fall progresses, provide months of changing seasonal color from a plant that requires minimal maintenance and returns every year with increasing vigor and increasing bloom production. Limelight, the most widely planted panicle hydrangea selection in American horticulture, begins its bloom season with flower heads in pale chartreuse green, an unusual and sophisticated color that reads as intentional and considered in the landscape, in a way that more conventional white or pink flowering shrubs do not. That chartreuse deepens to cream, then to pale pink, then to the deep rose and antique bronze of fall, a 4-month color transition that gives the garden the appearance of continuous, seasonally responsive attention without any additional planting, any deadheading, or any intervention. Beyond the one annual hard pruning in late winter that sets up another season of spectacular performance, 3 or 5 panicle hydrangeas in a grouping create the designed massed effect most gardeners associate with professional installation. From Zone 3 through Zone 8, This plant delivers its seasonal statement reliably, getting larger and more floriferous every season, without any disease management or pest pressure. Here's the midpoint of this list, and the moment to say something directly to the homeowners watching this video who have wanted their property to look the way that the best properties in their neighborhood look, and who have assumed that the difference is budget rather than plant selection. It is almost never budget. The plants that create the impression of serious investment in a residential landscape are available at the same garden centers and for the same prices as the plants that create no impression at all. The difference is knowing which plants to choose. Drop a U.S. state or hardiness zone in the comments right now, because gardeners in the same region reading those comments are making the same plant selection decisions, and what creates presence and visual value in one Zone 6 garden creates it in every Zone 6 garden. Plant 5, Magnolia, the statement tree. Magnolia is the plant that single-handedly transforms the perceived value of a residential property more reliably than any other single tree available in American horticulture. And the reason is scale, presence, and the specific quality of the bloom that magnolia produces in spring. A saucer magnolia, Magnolia X, Sulanjana, in full bloom in March or April is a visual event so dramatic and so unexpected at that time of year that it produces the stopped-in tracks response in observers that most garden plants work for their entire lives to achieve. The goblet-shaped flowers in white, pink, and purple that cover the bare branches before any foliage emerges create a display that looks less like something growing in a residential yard and more like something from a botanical garden that requires significant expertise and investment to produce. The evergreen magnolias, Magnolia grandiflora and its cultivars, provide a different category of garden value that is equally associated with high-end residential landscapes in the American South and increasingly in the Mid-Atlantic. The large, glossy, dark green leaves with their russet-brown undersides create a foliar texture so rich and so sophisticated that the plant earns its place in the landscape through 12 months of the year without relying on its extraordinary white summer flowers to justify the space it occupies. A little gem or Bracken's brown beauty, the compact evergreen magnolia selections that fit into residential spaces without the 60-foot spread of the standard species, provides the signature glossy evergreen presence that most homeowners associate with the most valuable residential landscapes in their region. Jane, Betty, and the little girl hybrid magnolias bloom reliably in Zones 4 and 5, bringing the dramatic spring flowering to cold climates where standard saucer magnolia is marginally hardy. They bloom several weeks later, largely avoiding the late frost damage that can destroy the flower display in cold climate springs. Plant 6, Allium, the unexpected purple globelium, the flowering onion, is the plant that appears in the gardens of the most design-conscious homeowners in America and almost nowhere else, despite the fact that it costs under $2 per bulb at autumn planting time and requires zero maintenance once established in the ground. The perfectly spherical purple flower heads that rise on tall bare stems in late May and early June are so architecturally distinctive and so visually unexpected in the residential landscape that they produce immediate, involuntary recognition from anyone who encounters them. Reaction that distinguishes a garden that knows something from a garden that is trying its best. The placement of allium in the high-value residential garden is as important as the plant itself, rising above the fading foliage of spring bulbs, floating at eye level over emerging perennial growth, punctuating a bed of lower ground covers with vertical purple exclamation points. Allium creates the layered, considered effect that garden designers spend significant professional fees producing from scratch. The fact that this effect costs $2 per bulb planted in October and then manages itself indefinitely is information that the design industry has no incentive to make widely known. The gardeners who know it plant allium every fall and produce a late spring garden that most observers assume required professional consultation and installation. Plant 7, Wisteria, the romantic architecture. Wisteria, in full April bloom, is the garden image that most Americans carry in their minds when they imagine what a truly extraordinary residential garden could look like. Those cascading purple flower clusters hanging from an arbor or draping over a pergola, the fragrance that fills the outdoor air for weeks, the visual drama of something so abundant and so beautiful that it seems to transform the entire property around it. The gardener who achieves this effect on their own property, on a structure they built or installed specifically for this plant, has created a garden feature that neighbors photograph and visitors remember. Blue Moon Wisteria, Wisteria macrostachya, cold hardy to zone 3, blooms 3 times per season rather than the Asian species single spring flush. For the gardener who wants the cascading flowers and extraordinary fragrance without the invasive potential of the Asian species, the American native selections are the correct choice. Plant 8, pleached trees, the elevated formal statement pleached trees, the formal European technique of training trees in a flat, horizontal plane above a clear trunk to create a floating canopy of foliage and branch, are the garden feature that most immediately signals sophisticated horticultural knowledge and deliberate design. Intention to anyone who encounters them. An avenue of pleached hornbeams or pleached linden trees flanking a garden path or property boundary creates a spatial quality in the residential garden that is literally architectural, a ceiling of green, above a cleared vertical space that defines and encodes the landscape in a way that most American gardeners have never attempted because they assume it requires expertise and investment beyond what they possess. It does not. Pleaching begins with standard form trees with a clear trunk to a specified height and a developing canopy above, purchased from any specialty nursery, planted at regular intervals and then trained annually by tying horizontal branches to a wire framework and removing branches that grow in undesired directions. The training that produces a pleached effect takes 15 to 20 minutes per tree per season and requires nothing more than garden ties, a wire framework, and the decision about what shape the canopy should eventually achieve. The result, over 3 to 5 seasons of consistent training, is the elevated formal statement that most observers associate with European estate gardens, and that is achievable in any residential landscape with the patience and the specific knowledge that this video is providing. Plant 9, topiary, the living sculpture topiary. The practice of training and clipping woody plants into geometric or figurative forms is the garden art form that most clearly expresses the difference between a garden that was planted and a garden that was designed. A clipped spiral boxwood at an entry, a pair of matched ball-form yews flanking steps, a cloud-pruned Japanese holly creating an undulating green form in a passe border. These are garden features that most observers interpret as the product of professional attention and significant investment regardless of who created them or what they cost to install. The labor that produced them is visible in their form, and that visible labor is the signal of care and intention that makes the property that contains them read as exceptional. A topiary clipped twice per year, late spring and late summer, requires 20 to 30 minutes per session for a medium specimen. Between sessions, the plant holds whatever form the shears gave it. The 15-year-old topiary maintained consistently is the same shape as year 3, only larger and denser, and that direction makes it more impressive over time. Plant 10, rosa, old garden roses. The old garden roses, the gallicas, albas, damasks, and centifolias that predate the hybrid tea era of rose breeding possess a flower form, a fragrance depth, and an informal abundance of bloom that modern rose breeding has pursued for decades without fully replicating. The cupped, quartered, and rosette flower forms of the old roses carry a historical and aesthetic weight that the high-centered blooms of the hybrid teas do not approach, and the fragrance that the best old roses produce to oit. The true rose fragrance that the perfume industry has been attempting to synthesize for centuries is the quality that most clearly communicates to anyone who encounters it that the gardener who grew this plant knew exactly what they were choosing and why David Austin's English roses were bred specifically to combine the flower form and fragrance of old roses with the disease resistance and repeat bloom of modern varieties, have made this aesthetic accessible to gardeners who cannot manage the once-per-year bloom and the disease susceptibility of true old garden roses. Gertrude Jekyll, Munstead Wood, The Generous Gardener, and Olivia Rose provide the old rose, experience in plants that bloom continuously from June through frost, and that perform in modern American garden conditions with the reliability that old roses cannot always guarantee. In a landscape context, a well-grown old-style rose covering an obelisk or climbing a fence is the single most evocative and most widely appealing. garden feature available in American horticulture. Plant 11 Euphorbia, the sophisticated filler Euphorbia, specifically Euphorbia caraceas and its cultivars, along with Euphorbia amygdaloides, purpurea, and the ground cover selections, is the plant that appears in virtually every garden featured in the world's most respected horticultural publications and almost never in the average American residential garden. The reason for this discrepancy is not cost or availability. Euphorbias are available at independent garden centers across the country for comparable prices to the plants beside them on the bench. The reason is that the quality that makes Euphorbias so valuable in the designed garden, their sophisticated, slightly unusual, clearly intentional visual presence, is not immediately communicated by the plant at retail scale. Euphorbia caraceas produces architectural columns of blue-green foliage year-round, topped by large chartreuse flower bracts from February through May. A winter and early spring contribution almost no other perennial provides. The chartreuse that designers call the Great Connector makes every surrounding color look more vivid and more intentional by contrast. Plant 12, Calamagrostis, the vertical punctuation, Calamagrostis, executiflora, Carl Forster, the featherweed grass that has been specified in more significant landscape projects in the United States over the past 3 decades than any other single ornamental grass, creates a vertical element in the garden that is simultaneously bold and refined, permanent and seasonal, structural and dynamic. The upright columnar habit that gives Carl Forster its distinctive presence, so different from the arching, fountain-like form of miscanthus and the spreading colonies of panicum, makes it the ideal plant for creating vertical emphasis in horizontal plantings, for punctuating long borders with rhythm, and for the kind of precise, repeated placement that communicates deliberate design intention. Carl Forster, repeated at regular intervals, through a long border creates the visual rhythm that gives a planting scheme coherence. A border with randomly distributed plants looks assembled. The same border with Carl Forster at regular intervals suddenly reads as designed. This effect costs the price of additional grass plants and produces returns that design interventions costing 10 times as much cannot match. Plant 13, the one that transforms properties. Lavender, the Provençal statement. This is the 13th plant and the one that was promised at the beginning of this video. Not because lavender is unknown, it is one of the most widely sold plants in American horticulture, but because the specific use of lavender that transforms residential properties is almost universally missed by the American gardeners who grow it. Most American gardeners plant lavender in 1s and 2s, scattered through mixed borders as individual specimens, contributing fragrance and purple bloom among other plants. This use is pleasant and the lavender performs well as an individual specimen, but it does not produce the effect that lavender is capable of producing. The effect that anyone who has driven past a property planted with a continuous lavender hedge along a front walk, or seen a front foundation bed replaced entirely with massed lavender, or encountered the specific combination of silver foliage, purple bloom, and warm aromatic air that a significant lavender planting produces on a summer evening understands immediately as something exceptional. The transformation that mass lavender planting produces in a residential landscape is documented in real estate literature as one of the highest return landscaping investments available in American horticulture. Properties with established lavender in the front landscape, specifically lavender planted in quantities large enough to create a visual statement rather than an accent, consistently receive higher first impression scores and higher appraised landscape values than equivalent properties without it. The silver-purple combination of lavender foliage and bloom reads as expensive, sophisticated, and Provençal in a way that immediately elevates the perceived value of the property around it. And lavender planted in mass is not more expensive or more difficult than lavender planted individually. It simply requires the decision to plant more of it in the same location rather than distributing it through the garden as a minor accent. Plant lavender in quantities that make a statement. Along the front walk in a continuous edge planting, the silver foliage creating a winding ribbon of gray-green through spring and the purple bloom converting that ribbon into something extraordinary from June through August. In a front foundation bed replacing grass and mulch entirely, the massed plant creating a fragrant, drought-proof, wildlife-attracting alternative to the conventional foundation planting that most front yards settle for. In rows along a property boundary that simultaneously define the space, deter casual access, and fill the outdoor air with the fragrance that most Americans identify immediately and respond to with unmistakable pleasure. This is the plant that most efficiently converts garden investment into property presence. And the gardeners who use it at the scale it deserves are the gardeners whose properties the rest of the neighborhood talks about. 13 plants, 13 specific selections that create the garden quality that most Americans recognize immediately in the properties they admire and have never understood as something available to them. The plants on this list are not the exclusive property of professional designers, significant budgets, or exceptional gardening knowledge. They are available at garden centers across America, priced comparably to the plants beside them that create none of the same impression, waiting for the gardener who knows what to do with them. If this video helped, hit subscribe to join this gardening community and watch the next video on screen to keep building the garden that makes every neighbor look twice.